Hello, world. This is Sean here, and I am going to be talking about this sweet Mardu deck that I have gotten some very limited testing in with and want to play around a little bit more. This shell was basically inspired by this Grixis list, which was doing very well a couple of weeks back. I believe it made top 8 of a Grand Prix a couple of weeks after the Pro Tour. And I liked the deck as a whole. It just could never beat the white-black control matchup, so I had to put the deck down. But the deck was basically a bunch of one-for-one removal spells, and then it used Dark Dwellers and Kolaghan's Command and Read the Bones to kind of pull ahead in the late game. After trading one-for-one a bunch, all the creatures provided card advantage, and Silumgar was just very well positioned in the metagame at the time. So I liked the deck, but again, like when it comes up against a wall of removal, like a deck like White-Black Control, it was very hard to win. So I put the deck down and have since thought about the general strategy again, but this time in context to Mardu. Just playing in Standard, I've been continuously impressed with Nahiri. Unfortunately, red-white is not a very good color combination, so this is a deck that's mostly black, splashing red for Goblin Dark Dwellers, and then a touch of white for Nahiri. But she is just insanely good. She lets you cycle through your one-for-one removal spells in matchups like against white-black, where they are usually just rotting in your hand. So she does that, which Jace sort of did in the last deck. And then she's incredibly resilient. She doesn't die to burn. And her ultimate is very, very good with Goblin Dark Dwellers, letting you trigger the come into play ability many times. So she's just going up to 6 the turn you play her is insanely good, and even just drawing cards with her over and over again has been nice. So let's see, the old deck, let's see, I think this spot, this spot, this spot. So the old deck had four 4/drops in the form of Kalitas. Those got shaved in favor of Nahiri. And then the old deck had 4 Jaces here. So these 4 slots were Jaces. And I think that this was a Kolaghan's Command. So just moved some things around, added more spot removal to make up for the curve. There's less creatures in the deck now, so shaved on Kolaghan's Command, though I could see it going back up to 3 just because it's so much card advantage, even if we don't have as many creatures. Yeah, the Tormenting Voice, I wanted a 4th Read the Bones, but it was awkward on the curve, and I really don't like losing life in this format, since White Weenie and Bant can just be so punishing. So I'm trying out Tormenting Voice here, we'll see how it goes. But again, just the idea that we're playing a bunch of one-for-one removal, and there's some matchups where it's not very good. So just pitch it, draw 2 fresh cards. Also, Kalitas needs no explaining, he's just insanely powerful in the matchups where you want him. I don't like having multiples because of Reflector Mage. Getting it balanced and then having 2 or 3 dead cards in your hand the following turn can be crushing in the tempo game. So cutting it down to 2 with the 3rd one on the board. But Dark Dwellers really makes the deck tick. Card advantage lets you make up for doing all these one-for-ones. It's also a tempo advantage. Tempo, I've found, is incredibly important in this Standard format. That's why I was originally on Seasons Past at the beginning of the format, just because I love drawing cards, but the tempo loss from doing the Seasons Past loop is really hard to come back from sometimes. So a card like Dark Dwellers that gets you on the board and usually kills something or does something else that affects things. Dark Dwellers is what allows this deck to exist, basically. On the top end, since we don't have Silumgar anymore, I've been very impressed with Kolaghan in this format. Giving all your creatures haste lets you close out a game real fast. Her just having flying and haste lets you assassinate planeswalkers really good. She lives through an Avacyn surprise, which is nice. And oddly enough, this last ability has been very relevant. A lot of times people forget about it, and if they forget about it, then great, you just steal games. If they don't forget about it, then it kind of locks them out of being able to play a bunch of cards in their hand. Especially decks like green-white tokens, where they have a few answers to her, but usually their answer to a threat that opposing decks play is just to play more of their own threats and go wide around them. And this really stops them from doing that while also just killing a planeswalker usually the turn it comes into play. So I've been very impressed with Kolaghan in this format. I have not been very impressed with Chandra and Sorin in this format, and that's why Chandra is not in the main deck anymore. Her minus ability is very relevant against decks like White Weenie, but very often I've found that her minus may wipe the board, but then she'll just die to a manland attack, or her minus isn't enough to kill Sylvan Advocate or something like that. Paying 6 to just have them play Avacyn is also backbreaking, and her plus ability theoretically kills planeswalkers, but I mean they'll just chump with a token against if you're trying to kill a Gideon or a Nissa. So I've not been very impressed with Chandra in this format. In ramp decks, I like her a lot more because you can play her and do other stuff, but in a deck like this where she is your top end, I have not been very impressed with her that much. So instead of Chandra, I'm trying out this sweet card. It may end up being terrible since the deck is only playing 8 creatures, but I mean just the idea of gaining a bunch of tempo off of bringing back Kolaghan plus anything, right? You put a bunch of hasty power into play, or getting back 2 Dark Dwellers seems sweet. You get a bunch of tempo from flashing back 2 spells, or Kalidas plus Goblin Dark Dwellers. You know, you get a 4/4, a 3/4, and then theoretically you're killing one of their guys with the flashback and immediately getting a token as well. So Ever After might not be on all the time, but when it is on, it seems like the tempo that you gain back from it is much more impressive than Chandra. So that's the deck. I've gotten a couple of games of testing in with it, and I've been happy. So want to record some matches with it. And the sideboard is, well, the 3 Radiant Flames. Oh yeah, there's 1 Radiant Flames in the main. It would be more, but it's a bit of a non-bo with Dark Dwellers. I've thought about putting Kozilek's Return in this slot, but being able to kill Sylvan Advocates comes up a lot. So I've been happy with 1 in the main, just as a Miser's copy against White Weenie and Bant in game 1. But I don't. It might turn into Kolaghan or Kozilek's Return. So the other 3 are in the sideboard. I have not been liking Languish too much in decks like this because when you're on the draw, Languish, you know, they play their Languish, or you play your Languish, and then they just end a turn, collect a company, and then they're right back on the board. Or you wait a turn, try to get them to play their collected company, they get a turn of bashing you, and then you languish them, and it's still just not that great. So I'd much rather play 1-for-1 instant removal against them and clean up the guys that go wide with Radiant Flames instead of leaning too much on Languish. Kolaghan's Command is in the board because it's amazing against control, not that great against aggro. Infinite Obliteration is just in here because I didn't know what else to put. I've been playing the blue-red Eldrazi deck that plays 3 Ulamogs, and I've really been liking that deck. But I don't think I think the metagame is going to shift away from that deck being that good. But for now, I think having a way to exile Ulamog is important, and also in the mirror matches, you want to get rid of their Dark Dwellers. If you in the mirror match, if you get rid of their Dark Dwellers, then that severely limits their ability to pressure you. I don't know how reliably we can cast Linvala since let's see, we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 light sources, so Linvala might be a stretch in the board, but she just seems so good in the matchups where you want her. Chandra is in here just because I may very well be wrong about her not being good on the 6th slot. She might be better than Kolagon against White Weenie because she can Wrath them. It's much more likely that she can Wrath them than against something like Bant. I like Obnixilis just as a one-of. Drawing cards is good, killing creatures is good. He's great in mid-range matchups. And then Duress and Transgress come in against the decks where your removal is not as good and you need to deal with their hand, stuff like Ramp and other control decks. So the deck seems solid, but I want to get to some games and just see if it's worth exploring and trying to fine-tune. I imagine that the main deck is not optimal. Like Tormenting Voice, we'll see if that's pulling its weight ever after. It might just be terrible. We may want 4 Nahiri. We may want more Kolagon's commands. We'll see. But yeah, let's get to some games.